Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night to all those who are now joining. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good night. Good evening. Good night to whichever part of the world you're now joining us from. Good night and good evening to all. So share the live as you now come in. Share the live, share the live, share the live. Inform the world that Dr. Matthews is here. They can now join this evening's conversation. Share the live. Share the live, share the live, share the live. Yes, and to those who are now joining in, black love to you, and black love to you all. That's part of the discussion this evening. I realize that everybody is trying to run away from the race conversation on racism, the color of skin, and the way we treat the color of skin. Everybody's trying to run away from that. And when you bring up the topic, suddenly you're a racist. Well, you know, the thing is that even if you want to say that Gavin Matthews is a racist, I am trying to find it hard to believe so. Because throughout the history of the world, people like me, the Koshites, the Nubians, because all of that means people of darker skin. That's what it means. Not black, but people of darker skins, the Nubians. You know, before Egypt became what it was, before that Greek name Egypt, before, after the Greek name, which was the Egypt, and it turned to Egypt as the Arabic word puts it. All that area was the land of Kush and the Nubians. Yes, and the Ethiopians. All of that place. But you know, this is what we shift down to. We suddenly have an adjective to ourselves as the word black, because that's what it means. It's an adjective. Black is a color that represents something in the form of an adverb or an adjective. So, you know, we can discuss upon that tonight. That's part of the discussion. So what we find now, racism is taking over Guyana. So before I start, let me say good night to those who are, or good evening to those who are joining us from Guyana, to the Caribbean Isles, the Pacific Isles, the West Indian Isles, the British Virgin Isles, the Maldives, the US Virgin Isles, sorry, the Maldives, Mexico, USA, Canada, European Union, Great Britain, you know, to to the Chinese and the Hong Kong and people from Hong Kong and Beijing, to those from Japan and all over the world, those in the diaspora that are looking at this The Gavin Matthews Show at this time. I know I'm late, so do mind me if I tend not to remind you to say good night to you because of which part of the world you're looking from. But those on the South American continent, as far as Argentina and Chile and Brazil, you know, and Colombia, Venezuela, Suriname, Netherlands, the French and Dutch Guyana. I want to read a quote that strikes out of everything because somebody put up something on Facebook today along with the Caribbean Development Institute of Learning. I think that's the one that Mr. Rickford Burke is part of. Put up something that it is quite striking about Gifflan Office Max Halloween costumes. But let me say it plain and clear. I don't know why are we suddenly amazed or suddenly stunned of what Gifflan Office Max has put up there. We shouldn't be stunned. These people are racists. The minute you try to deprive a black community from rising to the occasion of recognition economically, financially, you're a racist. The minute you try to keep us at the bottom scale of the social economical ladder, you are a racist. The minute you continue to murder us in the streets, you're not only a murderer and a terrorist, but you're a racist. Racism kinds of work hand in hand with terrorism. That's what it is. It's just me to a point where it's beyond racism. It's pure terror. So I don't know why we should be amazed of such a thing. So if we're amazed, let me read this quote to you. I think this is better. So we can get an idea of where Gavin Matthews' mind is constructed in which area. It says here, as long as a white car, as long as white cars are still using black tires, racism will never end. If people still use black to symbolize bad luck and white for peace, racism will never end. If people still wear white clothes to wedding and black clothes to funerals, racism will never end. As long as those who don't pay their bills are blacklisted and not whitelisted, even when playing a snooker, you haven't won until you have sunk the black ball, and the white ball must remain on the table. But I don't care as long as I'm still using white toilet paper. I'm fine. Interesting topic. I'm sure that I must spark a fuse just now. As long as I'm still using white toilet paper, I'm fine. And I'm sure, guarantee sure, all that I said just now, everybody's going to talk about me using white toilet paper. Let me divulge a bit on this topic. To those who seems to kind of turned or turn a blind eye to things that are affecting us in the most racial and unethical manner. You know, let me turn to that. Now, hold on. You know, there was this guy that you call Muammar Gaddafi. Gaddafi wanted one thing for his country. And the one thing he wanted is the recognition that Libya sits on the continent of Africa. That's one. And two, the liberations of the Africans must be something that he had worked with so tremendously. So the first thing Gaddafi did, and I'm talking about Muammar Gaddafi, when I'm finished there, he was the ex-president for Libya. And when I'm finished there, I'll come to Guyana because tonight is a historical night because the story that I'm telling is based upon facts and not theory. You understand? Muammar Gaddafi realized that being the leader for Libya would not transform or transcend the Libyan social welfare. So what he did, like how we have the parliament, he went to the house and changed a whole lot of things. The very first thing he did was created a real African democracy. I know Facebook must be shaking by now. People must be saying, what? Mr. Matthews, how were you going to say so? Coming to that point. He said to the entire world, he said Libya was so wealthy that it's time for its people to enjoy the sweets. So what he did, he made free education from primary to university. It was the only country in the world. They got countries that say free education, university, but they say got paid tuition. It was the only country in the world where you can attend the university without paying a dime cent for nothing at all. Can't pay for anything. You just turn up, make your registration, start coming to classes. He spent his money. He spent the country's money on education. And when he finished there, he divided the country into provinces, talking about Libya. And each provinces democratically elect their provincial governors. He stepped back and he said, look, you all run the country. He created a book, the Green Book of Good Governance and Economic Procedures of Libya. Everybody had to study that book because it was the first African democracy, as we may put it. And then when he finished transcending Libya, when he finished transforming Libya into one of the most freest democratic African countries ever, he then approached the African countries bordering him. And he said to them, look, I realize Europe, America and all the Western countries are taking from Africa, sucking it dry but not putting back anything into it. So let's form a union. So that's how the African Union was formed. That's how the African Union was formed. It was formed under the guidance of Muammar Gaddafi. He said to them, let's create one currency. African Union erupted because everybody wanted part of this brand new democratic reasoning, democratic social welfare. Everybody wanted to be a part of it. And places like the Western society that calls themselves first world say, oh no, Gaddafi not a bit of it. You can't free your people. They got to remain in slavery. Racism got to pass its place. Even in your laws, and Gaddafi said, hell no. Can't happen. So they were trying their best to convince the world to go against Muammar Gaddafi. They had a few African nations standing alongside of them. Those are controlled by the French. But by the way, though, Gaddafi said African Union one currency should be three things: gold, copper, silver. That's a currency. The Western society said no. Can't work, you got to use the greenback. Africa said no. We will use our minerals to represent us as currency. And the entire world know until now that Africa, the continent of Africa, has the largest deposits of minerals, especially gold, silver, and copper. 70% of the world's economy comes from the continent of Africa. 70%. Sorry, wrong pronunciation. 70%. Of the world's economy, resources that makes up the world's economy, you add all of them together, comes from Africa. So what they did, they plot against that good man. They called him a tyrant and terrorists. They so plot against that good man that they involved people from other countries to come into his country and create anarchy. And they said he had weapons, searing gas, and all these things, and it's best to attack him. He was attacked indeed. And you know whose administration by the United States of America that happened? Under the Barack Obama administration. Of course. It happened under the Barack Obama administration. Hillary Clinton was then Secretary of State. That's when Gaddafi was hunted down and murdered bright daylight as a tyrant and as a terrorist. That's how they labeled him. A man who holds weapons of mass destruction. And the reason why I bring up this topic, because it transcends a bit to Guyana's culture and how they grow to this historical event. It simulates what happened in Guyana then and now. So we're simulating what happened in Libya then and now. Now, Libya is the only country where its provincial governors are participating in present-day slavery. Rape and murder of young women and men, if they don't want to accept that. You can imagine, you got a live video on Facebook where men are beaten with stripes around their backs, put to lie down with hands behind their backs and known as being seen as slaves. And the British Broadcasting Corporation, which is the BBC, who had somebody funnel that video out from Libya, have the audacity to talk about present-day slavery, saying it's a slave market. That never happened. And look who's the people who were in charge of it: foreigners, light-skinned Arab men. Fast forward, we're coming to Guyana now. The Western society never liked the PPP regime then under Chedibar Jagan, because they said to themselves, and I'm talking about the 1960s, they said to themselves that Mr. Jagan is a communist and they want anything to do with him. But the British didn't like Forbes Burnham either. So you had the Americans who didn't like Chedi because they said he's a communist. His wife is a spy, of an ex-Russian spy. All of these things they didn't want. They didn't want, and then Guyana was making friends with Cuba. And Guyana and Cuba were sitting on the doorsteps of the United States of America. So they couldn't get other neighboring countries to go against Guyana. Either, as we say, pick a civil unrest or a civil war, or try to fund something to in an unrest of Guyana's culture. So the Americans came together and realized that they need to change the government, because Chedi Jagan then was winning on what you call a race vote. So they realized that they didn't see anything in particular of having other inclusivity. So they wanted to change those things. Because if you continue winning on race vote with the Russian socialist policies, nothing couldn't be done. Nothing could have never been done. And you couldn't get him to agree with them either. So they decided to get to the Muslims to form a different party to help to separate the race votes, because what happened? They realized that the Hindus and the Muslims were one type of people, those of East Asians. Because remember, this is where they come from, as indentured laborers. So to divide them, they had to divide their culture. In order for that to work, and they divided the culture as usual. So by they getting to divide the culture, they divided the vote, because you couldn't get a majority race vote anymore. That's since in the 1960s. I'm talking about 61, 62, 63, 64, and 65. So up comes the birth of the People's National Congress People's National Congress, and the TUC then, that belongs to Peter de Geer. So they say, well, look, here we got one party divided, which is the PPP, based upon culture. And we got another party we could include. But they could only come to power by a joining of another particular political party. That was Peter de Geer, that represented the 2% of the elite. Because then, you couldn't go into Georgetown Club if you were not Portuguese. As long as your skin is dark as me, I love my skin complexion. Couldn't go there. So, what happened after that? You had a different set of faction. The PNC under Lyndon Forbes Sampson Burnham now came to birth, and they were hustling then for the independence of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. So that was granted in 1966 with the normal hooray and shooray. So they didn't want that. Jagan didn't want that to happen under Burnham's reign as prime minister. But it did happen. He accepted the lowering of the Union Jack and the hoisting of the golden arrowhead. And after that, they worked. 10 years after that, they worked extremely hard to make Guyana a republic, completely independent from the rule of the Queen, because then any country like Jamaica, until this day, the Queen of England is still the head of state of Jamaica. So Forbes Burnham wanted to get rid of that policy and that particular rule. So in order for that to do that, Guyana had to become a republic. So when Guyana became a republic, it became completely independent from the Commonwealth, from the British rule, and the Privy Council, which belongs to Great Britain. So then it has nothing now to do with anybody else. We are a completely independent country. We can have our own constitution that was created in 1980, 4 years after that. We had a constitution prior to that, but that constitution was based upon the Westminster system that came from the Privy Council. So we kept some of that Westminster system. And what we had a constitutional reform in the 1980s. Because we didn't want any laws that still crafted by the Westminster system that came from the Privy Council that still goes back to them, and we have to seek counsel from them. So here when the tide began to shift, after Guyana became a republic in 1976, Forbes Burnham then realized that the Western system really is to rule and reign over third world countries and take their resources. Why does this mesh with Muammar Gaddafi? Because Gaddafi realized the same thing too. That is why he independently gave his country over to what we call provinces, governors to rule those provinces. So Forbes Burnham realized that the only thing Guyana can be strong in is if it have its own food security. And Guyana was flourishing with that. We became the breadbasket of the Caribbean. Because we tried to create Carifta, we tried to create one Caribbean economy. All these things didn't work. What happened is when we created the Caribbean community, that's when it started working. Under then the guidance of Mr. Forbes Burnham and Sir Judith Ramphal. So, what has happened after then? The West, these powerful countries, realize that Mr. Burnham is not going the way how they really wanted him to go. So they wanted installation of governments, and it didn't work. It couldn't work. So what they realized afterwards is how to get at him. He was a heavy smoker, smoked a lot of cigarettes. He developed a throat cancer, and he went to get it looked after. And that is when he died, so mysteriously. They didn't cause a civil unrest, although they tried to cause a civil unrest in the 1960s. It didn't work all of that. A lot of people died, yes, but it didn't work all of that. But then after Forbes Burnham died, they couldn't allow the prime minister then, who was Mr. Hamilton Green, to take his reins. So they wanted Hugh Desmond Hoyt. Because they figured out that Mr. Hoyt would have been the first channel to have what we call installation of political changes in Guyana. Because if they allowed Forbes Burnham to reign and they allowed Hamilton Green to go on, they didn't know where the Cuban Missile Crisis would have taken them, because Guyana by then was fully allies of then the Fidel Castro government of Cuba. So they created positions, put it in the people's mind. Forbes Burnham created country band, yes, but he didn't create country band. But people say he created country band. But his policy is that if you don't want to sell me the aspirin and the toilet paper, and let us say certain specific items to me to import so my citizens of this country can experience such comfort, well, then I don't want to buy your stuff either. Because if you're only selecting certain items that can't come into Guyana, well, then I don't want anything to come into Guyana. We gonna make do with what we have. Because that is how the American system was formed. That's how the FDA came into power, because the FDA realized that food security is what is the strength of the nation. You can imagine Rice crispy cereals are coming from the US to selling Guyana. When we created our own Rice crispy cereal here, we didn't want it. When we created our own cornmeal here, we didn't want it. When we create rice flour here, we don't, and people now cooking with it, it becomes a dietary substance. It's coming till all the way from the United States of America. Very much well refined white flour, rice flour. And we cooking and baking with it. We got a fancy talks about it. When we were trying to produce it here, nobody wanted a bit of it. They say, oh, they suffer from beriberi and all these things. Now, we importing it into Guyana. A lot of beriberi going on. But let's stick to the topic. So what happened in 1992? Mr. Jimmy Carter, along with his now founded organization, came to Guyana and corrupted the constitutional process of how an electoral system works under the Representation of the People's Act. That's the first set of installation that happened. Because they said to Mr. Hoyt that Mr. Jagan needs to step into power. But tell Mr. Jagan that he could only represent Guyanese if he have a civic component. That's how Samuel Archibald Hines and Henry Jeffrey and Sheikh Bash and all of them came into play. Yes, Sheikh Bash wasn't a PPP. He was a civic component. He came under the civic arm of the PPP. That's how all of them came in. So we witnessed the first type and set of installation of government. Hamilton Green didn't want a bit of it. He said, call for new elections. You have the power. Hoyt said no. And from since then to now, Guyana become a stumbling block. We can't catch ourselves. We have leaders who are discriminating against us in a racist point, where they're now seeing black people at the bottom of the social, at the bottom of the ladder of the social scale, or the social structure of Guyana. And we have a continuous spiral effect on racism. Same goes with the same thing in Libya with Muammar Gaddafi, because Gaddafi was trying to tell the world that Africans must be seen as one. We must represent ourselves as one. Come back to Guyana. That's what Lyndon Forbes Thompson Gordon was telling them. He was trying to include them into understanding that, well, look, these people don't see you as fully and black. These people see you as black people. Some people say he had a study camp all the way up Essequibo, somewhere up the Palm Room, if he had Indian and black sleeping one, not an all kind of nonsense. He was telling them that integration must be something that is having a good effect on Guyana. If we don't have integration, we'll always have a racist problem. Now, we're seeing this racial effect because people who hold on to it, people who vex that the British came and break them up because they saw them as a socialist faction of then the Stalin government, the mighty Soviet Union. They vex until now. They want payback. So they feel Jack Dio is the best person to come in now and to pay Guyana's racism back. Because black people ain't supposed to get with it there. But little do they know that they are not counted as anything else but black. So how can you kill out your own brothers and sisters in Torong and tell you that you love us? How can you kill out your own brothers and sisters in Torong and go on the international stage and say you're talking about was it? What was our air fraud fancy words? He went there to talk about reparations, an apology to the black people that were enslaved. But yet still it is his government, after he was sworn in the 2nd of August last year. In December the 21st, went to the United Nations and voted against a referendum that we created along with South Africa to table it in the United Nations Convention that countries must be stopped creating systems to practice racism upon the black population. They went and voted against that. And Caroline Rodriguez, maybe, I don't know when she voted, maybe cataract took over her eyes then. And now they're trying to tell the world, oh no, they're not racist. Well, yes, you are. The minute you embrace these policies, these systematic changes to demote the population of African Guyanese, you are. Because to me, it's like a black against black. So that's what makes you an apartheid system. Because you're now seen as apartheid or apartheid, whichever one you want to pronounce and hold on and walls with it. The fact must becomes the fact at all times. Don't let me run away from this point. Why are we running away from the point? The fact is the fact. Now the PPP is doing what it does the best. spend money on trying to divide the country and practice racism. This must be stopped. It cannot be lingering in the air for all times. We have become a multiracial society. The minute you start looking at your wife who's East Indian and the husband who's black, and we start looking at each other differently, there is the practice of racism. Because you're now being swindled by a rodent who sees no best way forward. Anybody who lives a life like an apartheid system, divided, these people are rodents. They're not human beings. Because it is to be humane to be a human, not inhumane. Humane. When you accept humanity, when you look beyond the color of a man's eyes and you think of him as one, but the time you see the color of his skin and forget his eyes, well, then you don't think of yourself. That is what is going on. It is the same practice. Now we have present-day slavery in Guyana. Because if you can't have a covert book to exercise your business, the government that you're paying taxes to keep above the water doesn't even want to tend to you. Imagine you are paying taxes every time. That's why I say stop buying from these people. Every time you go into the stores and you pay for something, you're paying that 14% value added tax. Who you think and where you think that money goes to? It goes to the PPP, de facto illicit terrorist regime, because they're in charge of that particular aspect, that particular financial aspect of the day. So the more money you spend is the more you're paying them to prop them up, to say, well, yes, remember Jack Dio said when he was protesting, when he was opposition leader, talk to the business community, y'all stop paying taxes because the government can't function. Now it's the same way around. Y'all stop paying taxes because the government can't function, the PPP can't function. The racism cannot be peddled. It is not knowing who is a liar. It's not knowing that Jack Doe is lie, a fraud is lie, the chat treat is lie, or everybody in the PPP is lie. It's not knowing who lies. It's knowing what can we do about such an effect. Because to my understanding, where slavery abides is always an uprising. There's always an uprising. There's always a revolt. Because when you take a man's freedom away, it's like taking his life away and he has to defend it. You ever put a cat in the room and you're washing it with licks and you realize he ain't got no way for go, he ain't got no escape? What do you think is happening? His fur and his skin suddenly prostrates itself. And he stands on his claws ready to strike back. Because he has to defend the very essence of his life. So what about us? What about us? This thing ain't got here. I can't understand how an Indian man can decide to be a racist against a black man. Somehow or the other, I am trying to visualize how an Indian man can be a racist against an African Guyanese. I want to, because to my historical view is that when they came here as a class of people. And they're still a class of people. to those from the continent of India or from the countries of India. Because when Jack Dio left Guyana when he was president and visited India, they treat him as a second-class citizen. Can you remember that? The only visual arts prospect of him, that's the picture, was him sitting in an Indian fighter jet, visiting a province of India. Not the president. They still treat them as class and second-class citizens. Can you remember the Indian film star that they brought here a couple of years ago? They brought her here to sing, and people flushed the I think it's in the stadium they brought her and put her. I can't remember. Somewhere the bridge her put her, and she sat down in that chair and she waved her hands. You know why? They didn't tell you the other part of the story. She saw us as second-class citizens. And why she saw that? Because in the country that she comes from, you live according to a class system. And as long as you ain't pale like she, you can't make it. It didn't look at the texture of your hair. It looked at the color of your skin. And when we left Guyana, all the way, where will we be, Coolie or Black? When we leave Guyana and we go to especially Canada, you could tell them you was Indian. Tell your plane, hey boy, you're a nigger. And they treat you like one. And why I call Canada? Because Canada is so hard upon immigrants. That immigrants pays more taxes in Canada. And as Canadian citizens, as long as you acquire your citizenship by applying for it, you pay more taxes, more than the natural born Canadians. But when you go to the US, you could talk cheese, bro. You got to drop your pants below your belt or below your buttocks and walk like a penguin. Because that's all they recognize you as. As long as you're in redneck and pale skin, you could talk cheese. You could go and blonde your hair like what is go over there and do. Blonde your hair and bleach yourself out. You ain't white. You're black. Or you're not pale and Caucasian. You're dark skin, you're colored. And they got different variations of color too. They got color, tan, yellow, brown. This how they're identifying you now in the United States of America. Well, in England, more worse. Them British don't like you at all. They only appreciate you, they don't like you. In England, man, you see the things that these guys who call themselves East Indians and wherever they're near races, you'd be surprised to see the kind of kissing they do in England. And they're coming over here to tell us, Guyanese, they're on the social media to talk about black dogs. When they're over there in them same country that are practicing the nonsense, the people see them as animals. So, what is happening now? The same constituency run out and left this country. So we end up now with the same black people. So now they can't divide the Indians from us because they're in there. They can't win a race, vote no more. Because there's no one around for them to vote for. So they're trying to divide the black population, the only majority population now that is left in Guyana. Divide it into class system. You got the middle class and you got the poor class, while the 1% of the Jagdios control the entire country by a full racist emulation of themselves. Full-fledged, broke where it's your racism. So they turn up and speak. You could imagine the de facto president, the dunce, the vice president, the attorney general, and the Minister of Parliamentary Affairs, all of them, look at the color. They didn't even look like me. They didn't even got a texture here like me. And suddenly they're representing me. How can the people who wants to enslave another set of people represent those people? How can you trust your slave masters, Guyanese? Because if we ain't protesting and we ain't doing nothing, that means we give these slave masters full-fledged control of us. Full-fledged control of us. And you want me to swallow that pill? When I sit down and watch we slave masters killing we, because that's how I'm seeing it, it is a fact. Racism is a fact. And slavery derives from racism. You understand? Because they had to see you as a lesser person. Oh, it's still in the American Constitution. It's engraved there still. Where those of dark skin colors are 2/3% of a human being. It's only the Caucasians are 100%. So people like me are 2/3% or 1/3 or whatever you call it. It's still engraved there. They haven't struck it out. The Supreme Court hasn't struck that out. And little by little, they're giving you some sorts of rights. They give you 1% rights, and they take 100% away. So you're left with nothing at the end of the day. That's what Jack Doe is doing. You can imagine, he's telling us to line up for our own taxes that we're paying and saying to Guyana, oh, well, and the world, we're giving the elderly $25,000 one-off payment. It's our own taxes. Why are we so dense? We can't realize these people just take in and give it back. We just get them. We don't get them with life and they're taking it from us. My God, we line up for the covert and we dine out like rice. The covert vaccine. We dine out like rice. Like when you pour rice from your hands, how it fall in such luscious grains. It numberless like the sun on the sea, on the beach. That's what it is. That's the kind of tyrannous effect that we're having as a people, especially us who calls ourselves African Guyanese, or some of us refer to ourselves as black. And you know what? As long as we sit and accept this, we will always be ruled by an external force. Our constitution will never stand strong to represent us because we don't have those that are fit to do so. Those that are strong to stand against any administrative, oppressive regime. Those that are not only equivalent and also qualified, but like it's hard to me, like when you go and take this education, to educate yourself, when you come out, you become more dunce than when you start taking this education. Because you make a fraud look like like Albert Einstein. Because you got people who are educated more than this man. This man degrees and diplomas were written by universities that cannot be found on to this day. He can't justify qualifications. And look at the problem we're facing with. We got educated people frightened of dunce like Nandalal because he's a complete dunce. Because when a man can't even find a loophole or a crack within the Constitution to say, well, look, I got you here, and you resort to such things like this, taking away our Constitution from us, the man is a dunce. But we make him look like a hero because we can't take back the Constitution. We got an educated woman like the Chancellor of the Judiciary now has to try to defend the Constitution, and yet still a case cannot be heard for the furtherance of the constitutional petition, elections petition, because like everybody frightened. Everybody frightened if they wake up tonight and meet a strange, strong, black-looking man knocking at the door that the PPP might send to kill you. Everybody's frightened. Everybody's so afraid. You can imagine people see me and say, "Boy, you know how the PPP they stay. He was dead next morning." I said, "So what? I am prepared for that. Are you?" Well, boy, I can't do the boy. I got me family for think about, but they are murdering your family too. So what's the next step? If you got your children and your family for think about, for feed them, and the PPP still murdering them, then when what's the next step? If you're so afraid to speak out, you're talking, but you're afraid to step out because you're thinking about your family. But you're speaking out and they're still killing them. So what is the prospect of you living? If you don't want to die for something, what's the sense living for nothing at all? Because if you're living for nothing and they're still taking your life, I don't know what's the next step. I want you all to understand this thing. Guyanese are now presented with a dangerous culture. The culture is ya you, ya me, dog eat dog. That's the culture. We need to get rid of that. Because when we keep that culture, Jack Dio and the international community feels that they're above all things because you're still afraid. You're still in slavery. You want to still eat the crumbs off the master's table and be satisfied. When they take the good part of the pig, they still give you the trotters and the runners to eat. When they take the good part of the cow, they still give you the face, the tongue, and the heel, and the tail to eat, which is unhealthy for you because those parts of the cow has the most effective and dangerous bacteria ever that you can think of. But we're accustomed to eating those things because that's what our masters, the slave masters, used to throw for us. Look, I'll go take the, eat the, cook and eat that. We made dietary supplements out of it. But here was the problem. The problem we still have constitutional effects by persons who are still feeling that effectiveness. And now we got a political scandal about our heads that is blinding us some more. And the PPP loves that. The international community loves that because they're going to look around and say, look, then people know their own rights. We are running behind persons that are not defending us. We're crying out for persons that don't have no time with us. We're seeking for representation from persons who are not even representing us. You want to see where it is be when the night come? You take a good look. Some of them you could find them wrong by St. George's Cathedral. You understand? Some of them, things are so destructive. But when you find where they are, you'd be surprised to know that these are the politicians that are representing you. Let me say this to you Guyanese. As long as we keep on accepting the things that the politicians does that we accept as politicians, we are not. Hold on, let me take this call. Hold on. Someone is calling and I need to get that call. Maybe it's okay. Yes. So whether or not sometimes we like it, it's a fact. These people treat us like slaves, and they will continue to treat us like slaves. This is the guy. This is the GMS Live Voice of Democracy calling you back. Good night.
Hi, Gavin. I would just like to differ from your problem for a little bit tonight. I don't want to take a shed some light on the amount of people who would have died who are fully vaccinated, because they just give me the amount of people that die that are fully vaccinated, and I guess the must got somewhere in between who are fully vaccinated and would have died. But all I keep saying is the ones who are not vaccinated, those are the ones who are dying rapidly.
I want to say this to you now, since you call into the show. The Minister of Health is a liar. You hear me? And those who working under him, I saying it loud and clear. He's a liar. By the way, I don't have to convince you about this particular regime. They're liars anyway. All of them lies. Nothing that is published in the public information system are true. They're a bunch of liars. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, brother.
So I want you to understand that. These people can't, there's nothing that the Minister of Health can convince me about. There's nothing. I don't care if his brains come out and they put it in a silver ball and they got it talking from some kind of electronic device. He's still a liar. You understand? Sorry to say that, but I ain't got no evidence. Hey, listen to me. The people are dying, mostly is fully vaccinated. But what they're doing, they're trying to cover it down because they don't want you. Listen to me. You could imagine. Here was the thing that we got to pick sense out of nonsense. We got this Sputnik. We try now to get the J&J and the, what do you call it? With the other one name?
Which one? The Sputnik or the Johnson?
No, the AstraZeneca. This is the next one, right?
AstraZeneca. Yeah.
You could imagine. We got 3 of them now, eh? And the United States of America say, hey, y'all stay there, don't come here. So now we got people now who is flying, going to the US with a PCR test that says negative of the COVID-19 virus. They're so afraid to present the books because the United States of America turned them back. Because Guyana is now known as a yellow zone country. That means that a country that its health system has collapsed. They cannot give, and why I'm saying so, because it happened on the USMC website. You understand? They said don't go to Guyana, don't accept Guyanese, because medically they cannot prove to themselves how effective is the vaccine. We don't have a lab to secure the virus, nor to trap it, nor to study it. So what we left with? The tell you line up for take the COVID. Line up, yeah, come. We can't even travel to Barbados with a card. Because Barbados don't come together. You don't come to Barbados. And them is the first country give we the Sputnik. They get a whole set in the Barbados. You can imagine how disrespectful this is this woman. Maya Motley tell the dunce, look, take all. Because we want. The dunce take it and get a population. And they want you from since to say, you come from where? Guyana? You best tell them that you get vaccinated. Because you got in the country. You best don't pull out the card and show them like how he's got line up in the ministry and take out the book and show them and write down we name and ID card. I mean, and then you telling me I must go and take it if me want to take it. And the next thing, I tell you this now. I was jogging the other day in an elevated position. 2 ambulances passed me making a set nice. They ain't got nobody in it. You know where they went and go? at the COVID center and turn back. You hear what I'm telling you? Two. So what they tell me? They getting paid for running the place, making a set of nice. Want me, want me, want me, want more of you all the time. This is the nice ambulance saying, want me, want me, want me, want more of you. Come bring y'all. Arch. Yeah.
Anyway, Gavin, thanks for your update.
Yeah, man, you're welcome. Stay safe and be careful.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
You too, brother.
You know, Gavin Matthews already. Me mouthing a cover friend. And I don't hesitate for talk whatever me mind and talk the truth. I love to speak the truth, but them murders who we got here. This installed regime of terrorists. You know. I know it's the amazing thing. These first world countries that trying to make the vaccine mandatory in Guyana, or this, I can't say the first world countries, this choppity want to be terrorist regime are trying to say that mandatory and things will work out better. And the countries with them vaccines, they're free. And the PCR tests, they're free. People are rallying against mandatory vaccination there. And their own presidents and their own governments can't tell them about mandatory vaccination. And this dunce that we got, along with a couple of them who decide to follow them house slaves, trying to tell you what mandatory. Let me end this show, eh? I want to thank all those who have joined in and, make the Gavin Matthews show a success. I want to thank those who have voted and to advise others to vote. I want you to take the information and share it with your friends and family to vote on that referendum. Try to see if you can make it possible on your Facebook. And share this like how you're sharing the rest of things with, with your people that you think you want to be political figures to represent. You share it so we can have this constitutional effect happen for the people and all Guyana. And don't forget to contribute to our GoFundMe site, which is pinned on that page also too. I want to say thank you once again. Stay safe, be careful, sanitize yourself, wear a mask. Don't forget the little ones you take into public places. And if you want to contact me, please do so. Please do so by the number on the screen, WhatsApp, or straight calls. This is Dr. Matthews saying Cheerios. Saying good night, Cheerios for now.